Hi everybody, I'm Mahin, and this is a very special edition of the Bellydance Quickies. I am here today with Hiba she is one of the other instructors here at the Daughters of Atlas Festival. We're here in Grand Forks, North Dakota, and we're here in her hotel room because we're doing an early morning interview before we go to teach our last workshops and wrap the festival up. But I have taken a couple of the folkloric workshops that Hiba has been doing here at this weekend, and they've been really fabulous and full of wonderful cultural information. So we thought we'd chat a little bit about some of the social and cultural aspects that inform the attitude of some of the folkloric dances that she was covering this weekend, which I think would be of interest to a lot of you. So Hiba, welcome to
Thank you.
the
Thanks so much
Quickies.
for having me. I'm so excited to be here. Hi, everybody.
And we have to give a shout out to Natasha, who has done a fabulous job of being a host, and she's holding the camera for us, doing every possible thing to make us all happy instructors, and doing a bang-up job of it. Amazing. For sure. Absolutely. So, and our other instructor here with is Nadira Jamal as well. So, anyway, so let's get into this topic here. So, in the Sha'bi workshop, you were talking about the Sha'bi attitude, and in the headbanging workshop, you were talking about the attitude behind Khaleegy and behind Iraqi style, which is where you're from. So it was really nice to get that kind of that kind of firsthand cultural experience and knowledge from that. And so why don't you let's start out with the Sha'bi one. So why don't you share some of the information?
Absolutely. So yes, again, welcome everybody. Thanks for being here. I love Sha'bi. I love folklores. They're my specialty, and I find there's so much depth, and a lot of that is missing in North American culture. It's all about the movements and the technique and that sort of thing. So I really like to bring out that social, political, cultural awareness so that you have a little bit more depth when you are dancing. It's not just about the technique. 80% of it is the attitude, right? So with Sha'bi, Sha'bi actually translates of the people in Arabic. So in the style of dance, it actually came about in about the 70s. We have had sort of this monopoly in music in Egypt of Kulthum and Abdul Halim Hafiz and Farid al-Atrash. And so what happened was a lot of people started to self-produce music. So what would happen is they would get their little cassette tapes out and their little recorders and create their own music. The sound that you hear in Sha'bi, the vocalization is very raspy, very kind of guttural, and very humorous and playful, which really kind of pinpoints sort of the Egyptian style and culture and attitude. But underlying that humor is what's actually happening in the social construct. So for example, one of the sort of more prominent Sha'bi songs that you guys would probably all recognize is Sha'bi Tagare na Shisha. So if I could, sorry for my voice, but Sha'bi Tagare na Shisha, Ashisha, Ashisha. So look it up.
I'll link to it.
Link below.
Check the box below. We'll send you the video for the song. So.
It literally translates to a guy who ordered some shisha, but they brought him 2 little heads of it. So he gets a little loopy and doesn't know what the hell is going on in his life and what he's doing, where he's going. Underlying that is a sort of a point out to Egyptian culture and standard, to all the Egyptians that don't know what's happening politically, that don't know where they're headed in life in their working class. So it's really interesting when you kind of deconstruct the songs and their humor to really look at sort of what's actually happening in the society. Okay, so you see these songs that come out that are about taxis, that are about fruits or whatever the case may be, right? But they have an underlying statement about the political situation. Okay, so it's a very sort of lighthearted take on getting your voice out there, okay, if you will. So it's interesting in that sense. Now, going sort of backwards again to these artists that are now doing their own vocalizations, they're doing their own self-produced music and bringing it into sort of the underground of Cairo culture. one of the sort of grandfathers of Sha'bi music is Ahmed Adawiya, and he does more Muhammad Ali Street now, which is another interesting style. I'll just digress a little bit, but Muhammad Ali Street back in the day was where all of the artists conglomerated, all of the top musicians, artists, dancers, you name it, all were on Muhammad Ali Street. And over time, it sort of became sort of like the back alley where all the nondescript artists would kind of go and do their thing. So like the dancers who are also prostitutes, the artists that are homeless, and like you name it. So he kind of went into that style of music, which is another whole section. We'll do another one when I come to Phoenix one day.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And so like, can you talk a little bit about the attitude behind the dancing that we need to carry into it when we are performing Sha'bi style?
Absolutely. So you have sort of the basis of sort of the political, social side of it. Okay. So moving into the dance, it's a street style, literally of the people of the working class going into clubs, and it's this music from sort of like, I want to almost say the hipsters of Egypt. Okay. So they're in like these like sort of sketchy little dance clubs. Now, as a woman in Egypt, in most parts of the Middle East, I should really say, it's inappropriate to go to a nightclub, okay? And so a woman kind of going into a nightclub in general is sort of stepping on those boundaries set by the politics and the social constraints already, right? So we've got this attitude of like, can I swear on your channel?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I won't swear too. Okay, I won't swear.
Medium swearing.
Okay, that it's either up here or nothing. Okay, so I'll just not swear. But anyway, they don't care. Okay, so they don't give up. All right. When they're going to the club, so your attitude is already like, you know what? I know I've got it. I don't care what anybody is saying. I don't care about the social constraints that you're putting on me, because I want to go and dance in this club to this really crazy eclectic music. Okay, so we're already kind of going in with this nonchalant, like, the world can like kind of eat it attitude. Okay. So one of the things that I said in class the other day that I think Mahin really liked is you can go and look like a whore and act like a whore, but you can't be a whore, okay? So you're going to the club with that kind of like, you see it, I got it, but you ain't getting any of it, okay?
But that was so funny when you said that.
I look sweet, then things come out of my face.
The workshops, and aside from being like really informative and a lot of fun, have been extremely entertaining, because this is exactly how she is in a workshop. We all had a really wonderful time. Yay! So then, and the following day, so then we had the headbanging workshop, which was also awesome. And so now, like going out of the clubs and moving on to the golf with Khaleegy style. Let's talk about the social stuff.
Absolutely, yeah. So Khaleegy has a very special place in my heart. That's the Gulf states. That's where my hood is at, So obviously I'm Canadian. You can maybe hear my accent, but but that's my background. So it has a very, very special place and a little bit more of a sort of deeper understanding of it. So it's really important for me when I'm doing workshops to really relate that again in the workshops. It's not just about the technique, it's about learning the whole projection of it. So with Khaleegy style, I'll start with that, I'll end with the Iraqi.
Yeah, we're saving that one for last.
Save that for last. So the workshop itself is headbanging Ayubi. So I generally do 3 different styles in that workshop that relate to the rhythm, the Ayub rhythms. They all kind of have a very similar undertone. So it's usually Iraqi, Khaleeji style, and Zar, which we're not going to talk about today because that's a whole different genre.
Yeah, not a social dance. We're talking about social dance.
Social dance strictly, yeah. So with Khaleeji, you've got to think about sort of the region that these dances are from. You've got Kuwait, you've got Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Oman, Bahrain, and so on, Qatar. What you generally see dancers performing either Kuwaiti or Saudi. Saudi is sort of what I tend to do. So talking about Saudi Arabian culture, you've got social constraints in terms of a woman's appearance, okay? So by law, a woman has to be completely covered, okay? So a lot of women even wear gloves because they don't want to show their hands. The only thing you can really see are your eyes, okay? So you're wearing a full niqab, which is just completely covering your whole body. And it's meant for modesty. It's not meant to oppress women. There are a lot of women in government. There are a lot of women who are doctors, who are in very high fields of employment. They're allowed to drive. I mean, the one constraint is that they're not really allowed to go out in public without having an escort. But again, it's like this weird, I shouldn't say weird, it's a different culture, right? But there's a disconnect between like women in high standing, right? But also sort of this old mentality of trying to protect women from the lasciviousness of men, okay? So that's sort of where it comes from, a place of like protecting women because, you know, in the medieval times, they couldn't protect themselves. And so that still kind of continued on. So despite having these opportunities, there's no autonomy, okay? So you can be a doctor, you can be a high-standing government official, but you're not allowed to express who you are as an individual. You're just another woman in a niqab who happens to be a doctor. Okay, do you see what I mean? Mm-hmm. So there's this sort of divide between, you know, who you are as a person at home versus who you are outside of home, which is like every other woman out there. So when you think of this context and then you go into the home where you can truly express yourself, okay, this is where you're going to see sort of these little subtleties come out in expression, okay? We tend to have Khaleegy dance done in a home with all your girlfriends, all your family, all female. Everybody's just like letting loose, okay? So in the culture, two things are very important. Money and showcasing things that illustrate your wealth, okay? So you can see the thobes, maybe we can add a picture or two of the Khaleegy thobes. But they're big, long square pieces of fabric, basically, that are fully embroidered. I'm sure you've seen them. In the Khalij, they're embroidered with real gold threads, with emeralds, diamonds, like you name it, rubies. They're stunning, okay? So the more elaborate your thobe is, and by the way, the thobes are very old school. Nobody wears them anymore. But we still do in the performance sense. Mm-hmm. You know, before, probably 20 years ago, they would still wear like the really embellished, gorgeous little huge thobes. The other thing that illustrates wealth is the length of your hair and how healthy and shiny and beautiful it is. And that's where the hair whipping comes into play a little bit. That's also a little bit of sort of the sort of Bedouin culture kind of coming in from way back, right? Sort of release through your hair and like sort of the pagan side of things, which is really interesting. That's a whole other video. So, you know, when you're looking at Khaleegy dance and you see all the little subtle movements and the tiny little expressions there and the, you know, pointing to the eyes and showing off the thobe. All these little subtleties are so much more powerful when you think of the context outside of that, mm-hmm. and looking into, you know, sort of having this extremely powerful little shoulder bump, because that's so taboo when you step outside your front door.
Oh, yeah.
Do you see what I mean? So, so it's really interesting when you're doing your Khaleegy, we're sort of, as North American dancers, in this mentality that everything has to be big and splashy and like crazy, right? And then when we go into a lot of the folklores, even the ones that look like they're big, powerful movements, it's so subtle and everything's just really tight and within, because your expression is coming from your soul and projecting out, as opposed to, you know, doing the big poses and like being like American cabaret style, or, right. You know, or even just, you know, the modern Egyptian style, mm-hmm. where everything is just like very ballet and very like open, and coming back into these little subtleties that work with the music and the
yeah,
rhythms.
and
Really
it's important for the dancers to understand these things, because then they go somewhere and they watch something that is properly done with its style, and they go, yeah, they put that on stage. That's boring, right? I mean, and we actually had a situation many years ago where one of my groups brought a Khaleegy piece to the stage, and someone was like, well, what's with the big dresses? And it's like, learn to identify your folkloric styles. There's a point behind this.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, it's uninformed. It's like you're judging from an uninformed position, and that's that's unfortunate.
Yeah, what I used to do, just because we live in a culture where, these things are not that accessible, and let's be honest, a lot of people don't care to go and reach out that information. That's why I force it down the throats of my students that come to all of my workshops, right? Because they're coming for the technique. They want to learn how to do it, right? But you never really realize how important it is to your own dance and to your own expression until you learn that stuff, right? So every show that I do that has a folklore in it, I go and basically do this. I educate them, and then they come on stage, and it just changes the whole dynamic, So even though it's sort of outside of like what we normally have for a show, even a little write-up for those of you who do folklores and like want people to understand like the stuff that you've worked so hard on, and you want them to appreciate it, but they don't understand it, right? So educate them, right?
Yeah, it's important to have good descriptions, especially when you're dealing with folkloric pieces in a show that has a general public audience, and they're like, I came to see Bellydance, and what am I looking at? So I mean, sometimes that's not the best venue to bring a folkloric piece if you don't have a good way to inform them about exactly what they're seeing, and sometimes you can, and then it's good. But I mean, even within the Bellydance community, there's a lot of people who haven't been exposed to certain kinds of folkloric styles, and you gotta make you have to like pave your road ahead of your performance so people can truly appreciate it.
Exactly.
So.
It's interesting that you say that too, because like in the belly dance community we have, even the people who want to go and see a belly dance show, they don't understand the belly dance itself. Like I hear that a lot from people who go and see like American tribal style and that sort of thing. But I had a comment from a student in my Saidi class the other day. She's like, we're going to do canes. Canes, Asaya, it's a completely separate style of dance. So even within the belly dance community, there's that disconnect between the folklores themselves. Because we have an understanding, okay, well, we know Saidi, most people know Saidi, most people know that canes come into play at some point. Those are sort of the two go-tos for folkloric styles, so there's even a disconnect with understanding the differences between the folklores within the belly dance community itself. So like putting that out into the public, can be very confusing.
Definitely.
Yeah, awesome. So Iraqi style. So this one's an interesting one because Iraqi style kind of came out of nowhere to you guys, right? It was just like it wasn't there for years and years, and then all of a sudden it was like, that's kind of cool. What the hell is that?
Oh, right? Yeah, we saw the Eastern European dancers and the Russian dancers and such. That's just like all of a sudden, what are they doing?
Yeah, they have accessibility to all the Iraqi dancers who are in that region. I mean, a lot of them have gone to Turkey and to, Syria is no more. But, they've gone to those regions, and so they have more accessibility. So they got a hold of sort of the Iraqi technique way in advance. I've done Iraqi style for my whole life. But in Arabic culture, the Kauli style of dance, or the Kaulis in general, are basically, Kauli is an Iraqi gypsy, okay? And they sort of have the same conception, if you will, like the same, people have the same viewpoint as they do with gypsies all around the world, right? Where they're sort of like considered lower class or considered to be subpar. You don't want to be like a gypsy. They're like the outskirts, right? So in Iraq, it was the same kind of thing. Like if somebody called you a kauli or a kauliya, which is the feminine form, that is the biggest insult. You would get punched out, okay? Like, I don't know what the equivalent would be, I don't know, like it's just
any
a
kind
very
of an ethnic
negative
slur that you
basically
sling against someone, yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah. So it was just a very, very sort of dark thing to be called a Khaleegy. So after the war, actually, let me backtrack a bit. There was a very long embargo placed on Iraq, and so the Iraqis were having problems, just having enough food, getting enough, medicine in to keep their families afloat, to keep everything just going. Mm-hmm. And so, the arts kind of took the back burner on everything. And Iraqi arts were so incredible in the 70s. Like, I get chills when I think about it, and I don't know if you can look this stuff up, but there was the Iraqi folklore group that did all the different forms of Iraqi folklores and dances and music. Musicians were traveling all around the world doing just the most amazing pieces. And then there was the war between Iran and Iraq in the 80s. In the 90s, there was the Gulf War, of course, and then the embargo was straight after that up until 2003, which was sort of the next prominent war in that region. So after the war, probably about 2005, 2006, 2007, in and around that time frame, where the embargo was lifted, even though the political situation was still very volatile, and it is still very, very volatile to this day, people finally had more money. They were making a lot more money. They had a lot more freedom. They had a lot more autonomy, and they were able to finally get back into their artistic expression. Okay, but the only people that kept that artistry alive were the Khaleegy. Okay, so there were sort of the black market things going on, the underground musicians and that sort of thing. But really, the only thing that really survived was the Khaleegy dances and music and that sort of thing. And so the interesting thing is now these people that were so ostracized became sort of a symbol of national pride. Okay, so with Iraqi dance, this now becomes a political expression of freedom to do Hecha style, which is the actual rhythm. I always like to refer to the folklore styles with the rhythms that they do. So a lot of times you'll hear Iraqi described as Khaleegy. It's still inappropriate to say that.
Oh,
okay. So it's Hecha style. That's the music. Okay, and that's what we call it. Okay.
Yeah, it's interesting because when you see it, on YouTube, you see a Khaleegy or all
exactly.
It's almost the same as calling Roma dance gypsy style.
Exactly.
It's inappropriate.
Yeah, and it just goes to show sort of like a little bit of that sort of ignorance, that cultural ignorance, So
it's
the people that are going
ignorance for sure,
absolutely. Yeah. Like, I mean, people are going into it, learning the technique and how to do the style and do the kind of learning the basis of it. But again, 80% of it is the attitude and the understanding behind the culture, right? So, like going into, a performance and saying, yeah, I'm doing gypsy style, like it's so inappropriate. So we want to bring that back, Hecha style, and that's Hecha. Okay, pretty simple. Hecha. Okay. Hecha, if you want to say it in Arabic. But basically, this new sort of symbol of national pride has been something that's been happening for hundreds of years. It was just sort of like, oh, there are the Khaleegy again. We're gonna walk away now. But now, it's sort of become again that symbol of expression, of freedom, and so on. So
it's just fascinating and like really super interesting information, and it's really brought another whole dimension to like all of the folklore material that you were presenting, and the classes were so much fun.
Yay.
So thank you so much for sharing all of that with us. I hope that lots of people watch this and learn something.
I hope so too. Absolutely.
Yeah. So again, I'm going to thank Hiba for being with us today, and I want to thank Natasha and Nadira and all of the volunteers, the many, many, many volunteers that made this such a fabulous
Absolutely.
weekend.
Amazing weekend.
Hopefully, if
come
you
next time.
didn't consider coming up to Grand Forks for a Bellydance festival, you'll check it out next year. Hopefully they'll be doing it again next year. So that we're going to sign off on this one. And if you aren't familiar with the other days of the Bellydance Quickies, you can check the link in the box down there and check it out. And thanks so much. Bye-bye.